the second part of our look at the Atlas of Eastern Europe in the 20th century. Now, if you haven't watched the first video, we go through a little bit of Eastern European geography throughout the early 1900s. So if that's something that might interest you, maybe check that one out before this one. Gives you a bit of context as to what we've already looked at. Now, I just have to first apologise again as well. Obviously the uploads haven't been as frequent as I would have liked them to be recently, but just know that I'm doing my best to get them out as quickly as I can. But yeah, it's just been difficult recently with my schedule being as busy as it has been. So yeah, I really hope you can understand, and I really hope you enjoy this video. I'd like you to drop in the comments anything in particular that you found interesting, and anything that you know potentially related to these maps and this part of history in terms of, the geography of Eastern Europe. I'd really appreciate that because, I've said it before, but one of my favourite parts of making these videos is, getting people in the comments, sharing things that they know, and everyone gets to learn a little bit, including myself, which I really like. So, with that said, let's get going. I think I'm going to read this page here first, and then we'll take a look at the map. So, this page here says, the territorial changes in Eastern Europe between 1938 and 1941 were reminiscent of the 18th century partitions of Poland in the speed and ruthlessness with which they redistributed territory amongst great powers, though this time there were two of the latter rather than three. Again, Poland was the chief victim. In the partition of 1939, Lithuania was allowed some former Polish territory, that around Vilnius, which is, if you can see, just about here. But in 1940, Lithuania itself, together with the other two Baltic states, so that's Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, so these three, disappeared from the map. The Soviet Union acquired the lands Russia had lost in the period between 1918 and 21, and in addition took the northern Bukovina, which had never belonged to it before. The new disposition had come about through the Nazi-Soviet Pact of August 1939, which Hitler had signed in an attempt to dissuade Britain and France from standing by their recent guarantee to the Polish state, which he wished to eliminate. I think one of the things that Hitler had against Poland is that Poland here, this I think was known as the Polish corridor, this thin bit here, and it split mainland Germany from East Prussia. So this part here, East Prussia, is part of Germany at this time. Here we go. The pact served Stalin well. It gave him security, he believed, against a Germany which had waged a vicious propaganda war against him since 1933. For that reason, and to prevent any change of mind on the part of Hitler, Stalin abided punctiliously, I've never heard of that word before, punctiliously, by the terms of the 1939 agreement, which had economic as well as territorial provisions. Soviet wheat and oil poured into Germany and were essential ingredients in the German victories in Scandinavia, the Low Countries and France in 1940, and in the Balkans in 1941, until the actual German attack on the Soviet Union on 21-2 June, I don't know what that means, 1941. Stalin refused to believe, or at least to act upon, the mounting body of intelligence information which had pointed to an impending German assault in Central and Southeastern Europe. The changes of 1938 to 41 made the vanquished and the discontented of 1918 to 21 the victors. The losers were those who had benefited from the Versailles system. So that was the Treaty of Versailles after the First World War, which really punished the Croatia. The Croats were given a separate state, as were the Slovaks, though the former were forced to relinquish land to the Italians and the latter to the Hungarians. In the Balkans, Bulgaria was given the southern Dobruja in September 1940, so that's this bit here. Where are we? September 1940. And after participating in the partition of Yugoslavia in April 1941, it had succeeded in repossessing much of the territory it had been given in the short-lived preliminary peace of San Stefano in 1878, though it had to allow the Italians to take parts of Western Macedonia. The Italians had believed the post-First World War settlement had deprived them of their due rights east of the Adriatic, and this they had made good, first by the occupation of Albania in April 1939, and then by taking Kosovo and parts of Croatia and Slovenia a year later. So, as ever, we have a key. So, a line going from bottom left to top right is land acquired by Germany. Land with a horizontal straight line is land acquired by the USSR. Top left to bottom right is land acquired by Lithuania. So that's up here, this part near Vilnius, which we talked about on this page. And then top left to bottom right, but slightly less frequent, is Hungary, acquisitions by Hungary, so that's parts here, and Ruthenia, a vertical striped line, or a vertical striped pattern, is acquisitions by Italy. So as I mentioned, parts of Albania, Kosovo, Western Macedonia, parts of Croatia, and then the sort of the cross-checked pattern is acquisitions by Bulgaria, so that's these parts here. So the Sudetenland here was part of Czechoslovakia, and it was home to a lot of ethnically German peoples. So I believe the Sudetenland was some of the first territory that Germany acquired in the Second World War. Even maybe before the official start of the Second World War, I can't remember exactly. I've done a little bit of research from what I can gather, Bessarabia was a historical, I guess, like a province or a historical, I don't know, area of Eastern Europe. And nowadays, 2/3 of this makes up modern-day Moldova, and then the rest is in modern-day Ukraine. And Ruthenia here is another one of those, like, I guess, like, historical, I don't know if it was, I don't think, it wasn't a kingdom, it was like a, I don't know, like a, the Ruthenian lands were areas, I think they are, or were and still are, populated mainly by ethnic Ukrainians, but I believe it's part of modern-day Hungary. As you can see, Hungary's here, Ruthenia is sort of in between. This bit that says East Poland here, I think some of this area here is modern-day Ukraine. So yeah, very interesting. And yeah, we can see that down here, some this in some of the maps that we looked at last video. In the early 1900s, this was the Ottoman Empire still, but I believe it's now Turkey. And then we have Yugoslavia, which is a mixture of, some Balkan states, no longer known as Yugoslavia. I think I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head. I think maybe it's Slovenia, parts of Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think, places like that. And then down here, further down, we have like North Macedonia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Albania, modern day down here, and obviously Serbia is there. Then if we look up here, as the map mentioned, these Balkan states up here, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. In 1938 they are their own countries, but then they are, I guess, they were assimilated into the Soviet Union, and they became part of the USSR. And I believe nowadays the Balkan states have done more to try and shake off the shadow, I guess, of the USSR, more than, say, I don't know, places like Belarus and eastern parts of Ukraine. So yeah, I think they are more eager than most to shake off that perception or that feeling of being Russian. So let's flip some pages. I'm not going to look at this one. We're going to go... Yeah, this one. This is the one we want. So... Let me just try and adjust. There we are. Okay. So the advance of the Red Army, December 1943 to May 1945. So this is a bit of context. Germany goes and turns on Russia, who it was allied with, or the USSR at the time, who it was allied with, and yeah, it makes it all the way to Moscow, and then the cold sets in once again. I think it's happened quite a few times in history, where it happened to Napoleon as well, where not we, but the people at the time completely underestimate the power of the weather and nature as a really strong driving factor in changing the balance of a war. You know, there's so many things we don't think about. There's the obvious, you know, the cold obviously presents human challenges, and many people froze to death. Oh, we've lost the page. Okay, yeah, and we've lost it again. Yeah, and many people froze to death. But also, you know, oil and petrol and things like that were freezing in vehicles, and it's so difficult to get supplies to the front line in weather that cold. And, you know, a war can only be sustained so long as you can supply your army. So once the supplies dry up, people start freezing to death. You have no foundation by which to maintain any form of offensive, and then suddenly you find yourselves going the other way, and that's what happened to Germany. And these black arrows show the advance lines of Red Army groups, so that's the armies of the USSR. Let's have a little read, shall we? So, down here, after its defeat at Stalingrad at the beginning of 1943, the German cause in the east was doomed. The Soviet drive to the west, however, began slowly. It was not until the early months of 1944 that Soviet forces crossed the border into areas of pre-war Poland. In these territories, which were disputed between the Soviet authorities and the Polish government in exile in London, the Polish resistance forces cooperated with the Red Army, but many Polish officers were then arrested and their units dissolved or forced to merge with those of General Berling, a Pole who had stayed in the USSR and had formed an army which fought under the command of the Red Army. So let's pause a little bit there for a second. Obviously, in the wake the Allies in some senses, I think, because Russia sort of, of course they would agreed that there would be democratic elections, to empower these countries to be independent and to sustain themselves, democratic processes to be put in place, but obviously that never happened, and they all became communist governments, and then, many parts of, places like Ukraine, the Baltic states, Belarus, Moldova, these countries all became part of the USSR. So yeah, it very much was a case of, the USSR was there, and they already had their influence was already deep within these areas by the time that the Allies won, and the focus shifted from Germany to, hang on, actually, the what am I trying to say here? The focus then shifted from, hang on, actually, we've beaten Germany, now we have to look at what dangers the USSR poses, and Americans especially were very afraid of communism as a concept, and I guess the ideas of, they were sort of revolutionary-esque ideals that they felt that could potentially influence their peoples. So yeah, it's a very interesting period of history, for sure. So let's go back down to the writing. So we've got to here, inside Poland there were large resistance forces, the Polish Home Army being the fourth largest fighting force on the Allied side, ranking behind the Soviet, American and British. But before the French, on the 1st of August 1944, the AK in Warsaw staged a rising on the assumption that they would have to hold out for only a few days before they could hand over the city to the Red Army, which was only a few miles away. The Red Army remained at that distance for 2 months, during which the Polish forces in Warsaw fought a hopeless but unwavering war against the German army. It was a savage struggle during which the non-communist forces in Poland were destroyed. Whilst the Poles waited in vain for Soviet assistance, the Slovaks, who had also risen against the Germans, experienced a similar fate. It could be that one reason for the failure of the First Army Group south across the Carpathians into Slovakia was that it and the Third Army Group were unexpectedly pulled southwards as a result of a coup d'etat in Bucharest on the 23rd of August 1944, when King Michael deposed General Antonescu. The Romanian coup brought the Red Army to the Danube, which it crossed on the 8th of September to force Bulgaria to join the war on the Allied side. The Bulgarians had declared war on Britain and the USA, but not on the Soviet Union. The Bulgarian army, however, had aided the Germans in anti-partisan operations in Yugoslavia. By the summer of 1944, the partisans under Marshal Tito were growing in strength, not least because of the supply of arms from Britain, and in October 1944, Tito's forces assisted the Red Army in taking Belgrade. Tito's quite a famous figure, I think. I've heard of Tito before. In the autumn of 1944, the Soviet forces, now joined by the Romanian and Bulgarian armies, fought their way into the central Danubian plain. So I guess that's the river Danube. But Budapest was not to be taken until after a protracted siege in which much of the city was destroyed. So what we just read about there is very interesting in that it sort of drives home this fact that, the Russians, although factually and historically on the side of the Allies against the Germans, they were very much acting in their own self-interest, withholding aid from Polish forces against Germany so that the anti-communist forces would be destroyed, and therefore they could basically swoop in and, take control with a communist force. So, yeah, as so often is the case, there are these pockets of self-interest in what is more widely and historically known as just two sides fighting. So this is a useful few maps. So Eastern Europe, 1900, as you can see, very, very different. Germany without the Polish corridor, Poland and Russia, Austria-Hungary as a huge empire, huge empire. Montenegro, Macedonia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, as we mentioned previously. And then if we flip the page, this is 1923, so we now have the Soviet Union rather than Russia. Yugoslavia, much larger. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Austria. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire has dissolved. We have the Polish corridor splitting Germany and East Prussia. We have the Baltic states here. Bessarabia, which we talked about. Ottoman Empire now becomes Turkey. Then here we have Eastern Europe, 1945 to 1990. So, one of the main changes, we have West and East Germany now. So East Germany, Soviet controlled. West Germany initially was under the control and aid of the Allies, but then obviously became its own country. Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Albania. Soviet Union becomes larger, so we see the Baltic states disappear. Then, these parts here, which is now Belarus, Moldova, all over here, just becomes the Soviet Union. And then finally, Eastern Europe in early 1994, certainly more like we are used to seeing today. I think there's potentially been some changes around this area. This is now North Macedonia, and there's still a bit of, dispute here as to what this is called. But we have the Czech Republic, we have Slovakia, then we have here now Belarus, Ukraine as independent countries. We have the Baltic states. This here now is Kaliningrad, which is Russian, and we have Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova as its own country now. I believe Moldova's, the one that suffered the most in terms of economically post-Soviet Union. Bulgaria, Macedonia, Greece, this is Turkey, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. So yeah, some useful comparisons there. So yeah, communist takeovers in Eastern Europe. So yeah, so the dotted lines, how's that possible? The territories where they are dotted are areas which, let's see what the book says, incorporated into the Soviet Union between 1939 and 1945. So here we go. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all in 1940. So the Balkan states, they go in 1940. Eastern Poland, 1939. Northern Bukovina, 1940 to 44. Bessarabia, So there's like Moldova, that's between 40 and 45. Ruthenia, whatever it's said as, 1944. So yeah, very useful graphic that to show us, what the state of affairs was and how it changed. Yeah, and here we can see territory occupied by Western armies and ceded in July 1945 to Soviet occupation. So yeah, that's East Germany, right? So yeah, very, very interesting. So I think we're going to leave it at that for today, because that all but wraps up that period around the Second World War and just immediately after. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I find this period of history in this area of Europe very interesting, and I really hope you've enjoyed it as well. If you have, as I said at the start, please drop something in the comments below letting me know what you thought. Once again, I apologise about the upload schedule, but I'm hoping with all my heart to try and get to some sort of regular schedule, or at least a schedule where I can upload more frequently for you guys. But with that said, I love you all. Thank you so much for the support as always, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Goodbye guys, and